In this video I'm going to show you how to do a brake job. We're going to remove the rotor off this Suburban and then do the pads. The calipers we're going to leave on, but as you can see the rotor is pretty much toast. The fins here are all rusted out, the whole backside of it's worn right down, and the rear pad is absolutely toast. So I'm going to pull that off. So once you get the car jacked up and supported, you need to pull the wheel off. These lug nuts on this one were a 7/8 inch socket, and that got those guys off. And then next on the rear side of the caliper, we're going to have to remove the caliper from the bracket that holds it into place. So you're going to have two bolts. You're going to have this one here and this guy here. In this case they're 18 mil. I should also mention this is the dual piston caliper. There's two pistons in here, and so we're going to remove those. I'm just going to loosen those, and might need some heat, like a torch, to break them free if penetrating oil doesn't do a good enough job. I've cleaned them up already with a wire brush just to get any rust off that's going to hurt the socket from getting on there properly and getting a good grip. So when you want to push those pistons back with the C-clamp, what you want to do is just open up your master cylinder just so the fluid can come up. I like to wrap a rag around it just in case anything decides to spill out there. This one's pretty high as is, so we may actually get some spillage on this one. Okay, so once those bolts are just loosened off, you're going to take a big C-clamp and just push the piston back into the caliper. You're going to have to get those all the way back when you put your new pad on, but for now that's probably enough. Now it's loose, and we can, when we go to pull the whole caliper assembly off, that'll come right off. So I've got the first bolt out on the bottom. If you come in on the top with a deep socket, or sorry, a short socket with an extension on it, it'll work a lot better. Just gotta watch that brake line. Okay, so once those are out, you can go ahead and pull that off. You just want to rest it up somewhere where that brake line here is not going to get kinked, or caliper's not going to fall and put strain on that brake line. Okay, and from there you can go ahead and take your old rotor off. So you have an emergency brake adjustment here. These are your emergency brake shoes. It's a good time to replace this and rebuild this if you really want. This is just a work truck. Like, I don't really ever use it just to get the boat in and out of the lake, so I'm not really too concerned about this. But you can adjust that. This one's seized up, so I would have to replace everything on here, so I'm just going to leave it as is and just put the new rotor on. Now, ideally, if you are going to be putting this on and using the parking brake or emergency brake, you want the rotor to go on kind of tight, like it's super loose. So you want to kind of have that set to where there's friction, and then when you pop it on, it's in place. So I'm just going to go put a lug on here just to hold it in place while we put the caliper back together, put the new pads in it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this caliper back on. We haven't done the pads yet. If you want, you can go ahead and pop those out now. I think in this case I'm going to, just to make this a little easier to go on. This back one here was the problem. As you can see, there's absolutely no material left on that. Okay, so once you get those bolts tightened back up, we're going to go to this lower bolt here. This is a 12 mil. I've just put some, so that guy will pop out. The replacement pads I bought didn't come with clips, so you're going to have to get a new set of those. I'd really recommend that. especially if they're old and rusted on like these guys. So I'm just going to pop this one and the upper one off. Okay, so once you got your new clips in, just make sure that they're seated properly. We're going to then take out, this is our slider. You can see that's pretty rusty in there, so we're going to clean that up. There's a ton of debris in here. We're going to get all that out and re-grease that and just clean up all around here. That's what our pads are going to slide on, so if we don't do that, that's going to be pretty noisy. So once you get it cleaned up, should look something like that. Really good idea to get these things too when you're doing this job. I don't have these, unfortunately, but replacing these boots, very good idea, because half the time they're ripped. This one is. Unfortunately, I'm just going to have to reuse it. So I'm going to clean this up. Just put a little lithium grease on this and then go ahead and put it back in. Good idea just to clean this area up as well, because your boot does sit on that. And just make sure your boot's seated correctly there. So next you're going to want to remove this brake pad retaining clip here. Just take note, this side goes to the back and this side here towards the front of the caliper. I'm just going to go in here and just clean this up, get as much of this little brake dust out of here as I can, just to prep that for the new pads. Okay, so I've got my C-clamp back on here, and what I'm going to do is just go ahead and I've also taken the old brake pad, I should say, and don't use a new one for this. I'm just going to go ahead and push each of those pistons all the way back. So those new pads are going to have a lot more material on them. With the dual piston, if it doesn't go back evenly, you're just going to have to come up here and do the same thing. So those guys are all the way back. Now what we can do is go ahead and install our pads. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and install this retaining clip. Okay, so both those clips are locked into place. Before I put the pads in, I just like to give where the rotor or the pads are going to be. Just spray everything down front and back with brake cleaner. So before I go ahead and put any of the brake lube or like brake quiet on this, I just like to go ahead and do a test fit just to make sure that's going to work in there, especially on these older calipers where there's so much rust. Those are going to be fine. Then what we're going to do on the back is where our pistons meet the back pad here. We're going to put some brake quiet. Then we'll also put it on the guides here, which will go through the brake retaining clip. Okay, so that's just to show you that's what it's like. I always like to do the back one first. It tends to be the hardest. And you just want to make sure when you're putting it in, you're going in pretty even. Okay, get it seated all the way. Okay, then once you've got that done, just go ahead and lower your caliper, just like so. Lock that into place. Take your screw on the bottom here into your bottom slider. Just go ahead and tighten that guy down to spec. And then just the same as we did for this bottom slider, once that's tight, we're going to come up here and do it the same to the top just to service that. Okay, so once you've done that, I like to just go back and make sure I've retightened every bolt that I've undone, double check everything, make sure you got enough lube in the contact points there, make sure everything's seated correctly, make sure everything's, you know, sliding correctly and evenly. Just spray it down with brake cleaner front and back. Okay, you can put that wheel back on, lower the vehicle, and then go and do the other side. Okay, once your wheels are back on, just come back to your master cylinder here. Put your brake fluid cap back on. Okay, so you're then going to come inside the vehicle, start it up. And you're going to need to pump your brakes several times. You can see it goes all the way down, there's no resistance. I'm starting to build up resistance. What that's going to do is just move the fluid that we kind of push back with the caliper and move those pistons back in to hold the pads up against the rotor. So once you're done that, you can then just go ahead and follow the break-in instructions